morning service. So, Father, I pray for Phil. Keep his mind focused on you, give him the peace, and help him to just remember everything you have laid on his heart to share with us today. Amen.
Thank you, Shirley. Thank you. My name's Phil. 11 o'clock. Me speaking for. I've got to just do something, so this camera, I'm going to have to keep an eye on me. So we're going to do a bit of Jamie Oliver this morning. Thank you. Oh, come on, oil. That's not working. I'm trying to get oil in the pan here. There's so little oil left in here. That's good. Okay. Now I have here some things I prepared earlier. I've got 2 pieces of fish. That was Roger, if you didn't hear, by the way. Roger loves his food. I'll explain why I'm doing this in a moment, but this goes straight on the barbecue, which I lit earlier. And could somebody just come and keep an eye on that? Roger, don't eat it. I shall position myself over here now so that we can see. Just Mark, if he starts eating it, will you let me know? We are continuing a theme which we've had for the month of April, which is living in hope, basically, living with hope. And this is part of our year-long theme, which is infectious faith. And infectious faith is a faith that goes down deep, touches every part of us, but a faith also that we can give away nice and easily. So the question I am asking this morning is, how does the resurrection that we celebrated a couple of weeks ago, how does the resurrection of Jesus give us hope? And I'm going to read the backdrop to this. I decided not to have everything on the screen this morning, because obviously then we'd be moving all over the place with the camera. Let me read to you from John chapter 21. This is the first 14 verses. Afterwards, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them, and they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals with fish on it, and some bread over here. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you have just caught. Simon Peter climbed aboard and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153, but even with so many the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. None of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. Just realised you could probably do with that, Roger. I don't want you to use your fingers. There is a secret ingredient in what I've prepared this morning, and we're going to experience that in a moment. But I've also made some bread. A piece of flatbread here, and this is just simply has flour, self-raising flour if you're interested, natural yogurt, and baking powder. And there is a secret ingredient in this. So what I'm going to do, how's the fish going?
Very good.
Is it cooking nicely?
Cooking nicely.
Yeah. How many minutes do you think? 10. Okay. That's not quite ready. Not quite ready yet then. Keep going, Roger. Get it a bit hotter if you can. Okay. That should have cooked by now. Is it not cooked? I tell you what, well, let's do the bread. Okay, stick that on as well. Let's give it, excuse me a minute. I just want a little bit of fish to be able to, that'll take about a minute and then turn it over. No, I don't think you'll do that. Okay, we are on the seashore. This is the Lake of Galilee, by the way. On the seashore with Jesus and his disciples, and he's cooking them breakfast like this. And can you imagine the scene of the disciples having been out all night fishing, and Jesus says, put your net on the other side? Can you imagine how frustrating that might well have been? Because I would imagine they've tried both sides. But actually Jesus is simply saying, put it on the other side. And they haul in so many fish, 153. And there's been quite a number of occurrences of Jesus meeting with his disciples. He met with, well, can you remember what they are? What other resurrection experiences might there have been, or have there been? Who can tell me one? Hazel? In the road to Emmaus, where you've got two disciples, and Jesus starts walking with them, they expound the scriptures together, and then how do they recognize him? He broke the bread. So when he broke the bread, they recognized Jesus. Another example of a resurrection experience.
The upper room.
The upper room, okay, who's there?
A whole load of them.
Except for Thomas. Good. Okay, thank you, Eric. Yeah, so most of the disciples are there. Jesus appears to them through locked doors, and they all are obviously delighted about that. But when Thomas comes to join the disciples, he's angry, basically, because he wasn't there. And what did he say? What did Thomas say, Emma? Sorry, Sarah.
I need to feel your body to believe.
Yeah, I need to put my fingers in the holes in your hands and my hand in your side, and then I'll believe. Yeah, okay. Any other experiences? Any other resurrection experiences that we've heard about over the last few weeks? What about Mary and Mary at the tomb? Okay.
Peter, if he loved her.
Yep. Sorry, which one?
When he asked Peter, do you love me?
That's good, thank you, Eric. That comes right at the end of this chapter, and we're going to reflect on that a little bit later. So, yeah, Jesus singles out Peter and asks him, do you love me, Peter? And Peter, he asks the question 3 times. We'll look at that a little bit later. How's it doing? Is it cooked and ready to eat?
The fishes.
The fish is good. Can we turn the bread over? Is that done?
Not ready.
Yeah, okay. Right, fantastic. I'm excited now. Right, can we put a piece of fish on there? And just one, I only need one.
That's for me.
And the bread. No, and that isn't for you, Roger. Is it done? Just flip it again. Almost. Just turn it over, it'll be right. I bet they never had this on Blue Peter. That'll do. Is it done?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Right, Andy Morton, would you come out here, please? Andy does know about this. What I'm going to do in a moment is I'm just going to take some of the bread. I'm going to break a piece of fish off just for myself because I want to make sure that this is edible. And no, you're not having it yet. I need to just check that it's not too hot.
I'm not having it now.
No, that's good. It's sea bass, by the way. Right, that's very good. Okay. There's a secret ingredient, okay? So I want you to close your eyes. You're going to have your eyes closed for about half a minute or so. Make sure the eyes are not open, all right? And I'm going to feed you something from the fish and the bread that I've just made. They're not laughing because of what... Okay, Andy, you ready?
Is it a leather boot from the Sea
No,
of Galilee?
I promise you it is nothing nasty. All right, you ready? Open your mouth. Come on. Right, tell me what the secret ingredient is.
Tastes like sugary, raisiny, and a bit of
You can open your mouth now, by the way.
mouth. Right.
Open your eyes, sorry, yeah. Tastes like what?
Tastes like a scone.
A scone. It was actually a mince pie.
A mince pie,
Can you get that now? It's fascinating. If you can't see something, you struggle to identify what it is. If I say it's a mince pie, where does that take you?
To my childhood when I don't like mince pies.
Okay. Okay, I'll modify the question. What part of the year does it take you to?
Christmas.
Christmas, thank you. You can go and sit down. Well done, Andy. Thank you. Roger, you can take that off now and then come in if you want. You can have a piece of fish if you want, but not all of it. Yeah. Thank you. A hand for Roger as well. The reason for asking Andy to taste what he thought was going to be fish and bread was that I wanted him to taste something that took him to a different place. Now, there are three things in this passage which I think Jesus takes the disciples back to. So these are things that he does or says that are reminders for him. Roger, don't eat it, or you can share it, by the way. There are three things in that passage which remind the disciples of something, just in the same way that Andy had a bite of mince pie and it reminded him of Christmas after a bit of prompting. Okay, those three reminders or rememberings, you could call them, that pen's drying up already, is number one, the catch of fish. What do you think that reminds the disciples of? Hazel?
When they were first called,
When they were first called, tell me a bit more.
he arrived Jesus arrived on the shore and found the fishermen mending their nets. And I think he also asked them to put the nets down.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. When Jesus was in the beginning of his ministry, 3 years previously, Jesus is walking along the seashore and he calls the first disciples and he tells them to do exactly the same. Let me read this. This is Luke chapter 5. Right at the beginning of the story. One day as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret with the people crowding around him and listening to the word of God, he saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little further from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that the nets began to break, etc. That's Luke 5, right at the beginning of the calling of the disciples. And then we have almost the identical story at the end of John 21. Now, I wonder whether when Jesus told them to put out into the water, and they guessed it was Jesus at this point maybe, and he said, "Put your net on the other side," they remembered back the massive catch of fish. That's the first remembering. The second one is the charcoal fire. Now this, in John chapter 21, it talks about they saw a fire of burning coals with fish on it. Now, the barbecue is the best I can come up with, basically. But that phrase, fire of burning coals or charcoal fire, That Greek phrase is only used twice in the New Testament. It's used here, and it's used a couple of chapters earlier in John chapter 18, verse 18, and it says this. So this is at Jesus' trial. Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. Because the disciples were known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard, etc., etc. It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter also was standing there warming himself. That fire, the Greek term, is the same one that is used here in this passage in John 21. So when they see Jesus cooking over a fire of burning coals, or a charcoal fire, Peter will have remembered, I remember that from 3 days ago on the Thursday night. So it's a reminder of remembering. Jesus takes them back. Okay. There is a third one as well, which is what Jesus is cooking. Bread and fish. What does that remind you of? The loaves and fishes. Right? There's two instances in the Gospels where Jesus fed first of all 4,000 people and then 5,000 people, or maybe the other way around, I can't remember. Each time he used a child's lunchbox which had barley loaves, as we sing in the songs, and fish. Bread and fish. Here we are on the seashore of the resurrection experience where Jesus is cooking bread and fish. Now, it might have been that it's a common thing to cook. It's the everyday thing to cook. But I notice if it was me, in my context, obviously from now, I would have remembered, Jesus is taking back to the feeding of the 4,000 to the feeding of the 5,000. So there's three sets of reminders or rememberings. There may be more, but I spotted three. The enormous catch of fish takes you way back to when the disciples were first called. The charcoal fire, the Greek term, is only used twice in the New Testament, in John 21 and John chapter 18, and that's where Peter denies Jesus. And then thirdly, the bread and the fish. Okay. Now, what do those three things help us to remember? Shall we use a different colour? Let's branch out here. I'm just going to pick things which I think remind me. So this is the catch of fish would remind me that Jesus is a miracle worker. Okay? The charcoal fire, because it takes Peter back to when he denied Jesus, is all about forgiveness. And Eric rightly pointed out, in the rest of John chapter 21, Jesus takes Peter aside 3 times and says, "Do you love me, Peter?" "Yes, you know I love you." "Do you love me?" And Peter in the end gets a bit offended. But the 3 times of asking me, "Do you love me?" is because of the 3 denials that Peter made. And the whole thing is about reinstating Peter, putting back to, as a leader of the disciples, the rock, if you remember, and he's going to go on and build the church. So he needs to know forgiveness. And the third one is, I'm going to call it provider. Now you could put provider and miracle worker together for the first one. You could put provider and miracle worker for the third one, but I've chosen miracle worker, forgiveness, and provider. Whenever you have a barbecue, try to remember this, that actually the things that we cooked on there today, the passage from John 21, reminds us that Jesus is a miracle worker. He provides for us way above what we need. 153 large fish, and the bread and the fish, the miracles that Jesus actually did for us, as it were. I started with the question, how does the resurrection give us hope? I think this resurrection experience helps us to remember that God through Jesus, is a miracle worker. He's a provider, and he brings us forgiveness. So I'm coming to an end now, but I'm going to have to rush off in a minute. But can I ask you a question? Well, I'd just like you to reflect on this personally for a moment or so. Do you need a miracle at the moment? Whatever it is in your life, do you need a miracle? Do you need provision? Do you need something that you haven't got? And do you need to know forgiveness? What we're going to do now is I'm going to suggest that if any of those strike you, I'd like you to, in a moment, to just to put a hand up or whatever. We won't get out of our seats, but just put a hand up. And we're going to play a song which is going to be after the stream finishes because of copyright. But during that song, if you need a miracle, just raise a hand. If you need provision or whatever it is, raise a hand. If you need to know forgiveness, raise a hand. And all I'm just going to suggest is those people around, we know, most of us know each other pretty well, let's just pray for each other. Put a hand on a shoulder and pray. You don't need to speak. You don't need to speak out loud. You don't need to have an inquisition at what the problem is. Just pray. Okay? And that will be during the song, and then I'll hand back to Shirley, but I will have to go very soon. I'm going to say goodbye to the stream now. The song we're going to play is called Power by Chris Tomlin. So thank you for joining us this morning, and we hope to see you soon anyway.